Welcome to Alive and Writing, a podcast on troubleshooting life as a writer.
I'm Shatona Havoc.
I'm April Heyman.
And I'm C.R. Rowanson. We're here.
We're alive.
And we're writing. Okay, today's topic is introvert, extrovert. It doesn't matter. So what does that mean, April?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Actually, I'm not glad you asked because I'm a total introvert and I don't like talking to people.
See how we did that setup there?
Yeah,
Exactly.
We're so clever.
And it's kind of funny because introverts and extroverts can mimic one another, but they aren't the same thing, obviously. Introverts and extroverts actually differ on how they handle social situations and how they recharge themselves afterwards. So an introvert prefers to be by themselves, and not because they don't like people, but because it's how they center themselves. They get their energy back. They need space and quiet and time to be by themselves. I know lots of people who are very talkative and like to be around people, but they're still introverted because they don't get that recharge from being around others.
It's draining.
Shatona.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, but it is. It's draining to be around people.
Right.
You like it, you enjoy them, you have fun, you go home and you go,
Yeah, exactly. Now, my husband, on the other hand, is a complete extrovert. He loves being... Yeah, I know. No, not that. He loves being around people. He is always the center of the party. I once walked into a kitchen at a party that we had gone to, and I am not kidding you, he was surrounded 5 people deep, and they were all pointing to him, and he was telling a story or something. But he is a complete extrovert, which is weird because he's an engineer too, so I don't know.
yeah, that is an unusual combination.
It is an unusual combination.
So that's introverts and extroverts. Are there any other types of verts?
Yeah, I'm going to go into the verts here because there's also the ambivert, the person who recharges in both ways depending on the situation. And we don't hear a lot about ambiverts. You know, everybody's into the introversion or the extroversion, but ambiverts, sometimes they need to get away from the crowd to recharge, and other times they're already drained and going to, be around people is what's going to, energize them.
That's really fascinating. I've actually never heard of that.
I hadn't either.
And that's...
I feel smart.
That's interesting because I think I may actually be an ambivert because I've spent time trying to figure it out. Sometimes I have to sit at home and play video games or read a book, and that's the only way I'm going to feel better. But other times, I have to go to a board game night. If there isn't one set up, I will set one up, or a movie night or something. I have to be around people I like, and then when I go home, I feel so much better.
Yeah,
and
you're an ambivert.
I had always referred to it as an introverted extrovert, but hey,
Or
new
an
term.
extroverted introvert.
Yeah, or both.
Or tomato or tomato,
Exactly.
Potato, potato. I'm going to start singing. You better be careful there.
Oh,
No singing.
Please, no singing.
I'm not allowed to sing, you aren't either.
Oh, fine.
So what's good or bad about being an introvert or extrovert? Why are we talking about this? Why is this worth an episode?
Well, I think it's because, for one thing, people tend to perceive authors as all being introverts. It is a common perception, and I think it's because it let's face it, it lends itself toward people who are introverted. They're already enjoying being alone and, in their own thoughts, and that is a part of writing. And so I think people just assume that all authors are introverts. That's not true.
No, absolutely not.
But there is some truth in the fact that there are a lot of authors who are introverts. But I think the reason that we wanted to talk about it was because as introverts, 2.5 of us here are introverts.
We'll let you figure out which half.
Yeah, right? So we have 2.5 introverts here in this room of authors, right? And there are pitfalls to being an introvert. Our society has really embraced the introvert right now, which I think is a great thing, but we're kind of going too far. As introverts, we can get caught up in our own little worlds, and it limits us.
How so?
Well-
Seriously, I want to hear more. So just,
Okay, well, then I'm just going to keep rambling. No, but think about it.
or April, I just want to know more about how, because it's a stereotype for writers, like you said, and it's romanticized. as the person sitting alone, typing away, sitting in the woods, typing away, or drunk in their office and typing away. You know, what have
So
you.
Hemingway, Thoreau, and what was the first one?
Uh, Emily Dickinson.
Well,
yes.
No, I think that as introverts, we tend to be introspective and we do a lot of thinking. So that actually does lend itself really well to writing. But that also closes us off to a huge amount of material we could be having and finding if we were out there at the party, at a restaurant, at a game
Interacting.
night. Yeah, just interacting with other people.
Right, because we're not alone.
Right.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about that before, about making
Shocker.
sure you get out and experience life
But
to
this
make
is
sure.
part of why.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd like to point out that introversion and shyness are not the same
No.
thing.
Oh, really?
No,
Oh,
they're not
yes.
the same. And additionally, they do tend to walk hand in hand, but there are shy extroverts.
This is true.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, they're people, because introversion, extroversion, your version, if you will, it's all about how you recharge, how life drains you from your energy. You got your laptop battery, you unplug it, you let it drain, you plug it back in, you recharge it. That recharging, how you recharge, some people recharge by being with others and interacting. Others need to get away, get quiet, take a deep breath, and say, whew, right? Shy people can be extroverts. They may need that interaction with people even though it's killing them to do it.
Now we know how to tell which type of vert you are, if you will. I guess, so we talked a little bit about problems that introverts have. What are there problems with being an extroverted writer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, because they do like to be around people and they tend to be gregarious and in the moment, they tend not to do a lot of deep thinking. And-
Particularly self-introspection,
Right.
which is really huge.
Yes.
Okay.
You
Well-
need to be able to download and review and apply before you can move forward. And because they always tend to be in the moment and out there, they don't usually take the time to do that.
So here's something interesting I just thought of. Another way you might be able to tell what type of vert you are is, how do you procrastinate?
Ooh.
So depending on
That's
my mood,
interesting.
I either procrastinate by going and playing games with people or by playing video games myself. Whereas I know some people, when they want to put something off, they go out with people. That's
Right.
what they do all the time. Whereas other people, they will just
Grab a
start reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I paint or I read.
Yeah. I do
Okay.
anything as long as I'm all by myself.
So
That's
something
how I
that.
procrastinate.
something I've seen with extroverts, because believe it or not, I actually know a couple, is they tend to get drawn away. We are just providing wild stereotypes here, which I think we'll get to that in a little bit. But something I've seen from extroverted writers is they like to go to other people and get feedback and information. And I know I'm guilty of this at times. They will overdo this, and their ideas will kind of get death by committee.
Ooh.
They'll talk
yeah.
to too many people and kind of lose sight of what it is they really want, and that's kind of a hazard of being an extroverted writer that I have seen and run into. Not saying that all extroverts have this problem, but
No, but again, back to the stereotype, though. There's a reason that stereotypes exist. There's some truth in it, or there once was. It's not always true anymore. It may have just once been a truth that is no longer applicable, but usually there's some truth in it. But if we let our stereotype limit us, if all extroverts are outgoing, gregarious, non-shy people, well, then what about the shy extrovert? What do they do? And the same is true. And all introverts are shy and miserable and in their own little corner and they can't function. Well, so what are you going to do? You can't let that limit you.
so this is a general thing about life that I would like to point out, that we tend to categorize things. It's how our brains work. It makes it easier to understand things on a larger scale. So that's part of why stereotypes exist with my, faux degree in psychology. But the point is, don't let stereotypes pigeonhole you in any way. Don't let them tell you how you're supposed to act, and don't let them force you to assume how other people would act. Because that can lead to really flat characters. People talk about it all the time. You end up with a cliche character or a straw man, and that's because you stuck a little too close to the stereotype.
Right. So if you're going to do that, make sure you're your stereotyped character is kind of a joke. You know, I mean, I've seen people do it in books. It works really well. You take this total stereotype, flip it on its head and really run with the stereotype instead of trying to make that stereotype be the fake person. Just a little aside there.
Oh man, that sounds like it would be really tough to pull off.
It's hard to do, but it's really fun when you find someone who's done it well.
Hey
Man, I love
April, what are you doing over there? Are you just recharging?
I'm recharging.
We've
I'm
been
just being
talking
quiet.
over you for a bit.
I'm in the zone here. I was just thinking, if I'm an introvert and I was at a party or out and about, how do I respond to the extroverts in the room? Because it can be incredibly overwhelming. And I'm married to an extrovert, okay? We tend to see things a little differently when we want to go out and do things.
My favorite method is to pretend to be a velociraptor, so at the very least, everybody will remember me.
You and my son get along so well. I'm not kidding. He wanted a velociraptor with a laser scope on its head for Christmas. I'm just saying.
Why wouldn't you?
I know exactly, right? The closest I could come was a T-Rex, and it just didn't fit.
That
what
is
he
not
wanted.
the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
No.
That's just not the same.
This is awesome. Okay, so then what do you do with that?
Well,
So-
I try not to run away.
So
It's like the
That's
first thing.
kind of hard to do, though.
I know.
Usually people get in the way, though, so
I
that
feel
helps.
like
They
there are
do.
kind of two sides to this question. Is first, I kind of want to know what you guys do when you're in that situation. Like, I know how I respond, but I think it's important to be able to tell how other people around you are responding. And
Okay, so how do you respond? Maybe it'll give us genius ideas over here.
so because I'm a bit of an introvert, once I know people, I think that's where the extroverted side of me comes out. Because once I like somebody, being around them is very recharging. But I struggle with just meeting people. I can do the small talk just fine. But then there's a barrier that I have a hard time pushing past sometimes, where going beyond just an acquaintance who is civil, kind of funny, to being somebody that you actually want to be friends with. And I don't know if that actually relates to any of this, but that's something that I've seen, and that really shows up in parties. Is I can do the introduction and a little bit of the intro, a little bit past the small talk, but then I kind of hit a wall, and it gets hard for me to carry on a conversation, and you just start looking at your shoes.
Yeah, well, you're one step ahead of me. I'm really bad at small talk. I mean, I can say hello, how are you doing? And then if I don't know the person or anything about them, that's where the conversation stops. Unless they continue the conversation, ask questions or make comments or something, but they have to do it.
Well, since you're an introvert, didn't you want to spotlight something specifically about that?
I did, and I don't want to say that introverts are the best or that we're the most creative, because I know some incredibly creative extroverts. But there is a book called Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And it's also a TED Talk, which is kind of interesting. But basically, it's about how introverts can be just as powerful and effective as extroverts, and that not our country, but our
By harnessing the power of the introverts, we
That's
can
right.
do something.
so unite separately in your own homes.
We can protest
Yes.
quietly.
In our own homes.
With doors and windows closed.
But basically, it's that our society overlooks introverts and focuses on the extroverts and those people who are more out there.
A lot of leadership stuff is geared toward the extroversion, if you think about it.
That's true.
That is true.
So let's say at this point you've been listening long and you have figured out whether you are an extrovert, introvert, ambivert, or something else in between that we haven't heard of because we aren't smart enough. Oh, what are you going to do about it? I think the original point of this was, correct me if I'm wrong, Shatona, that it doesn't matter what type of vert you are. You're an author, and that means you have to do certain things.
Right. And one of the things you need to do as an author, in my opinion, is get all the information you can for what you're doing. I can't, as an author, sit in my little room, in my own little corner, with, all the doors and windows closed, uniting by myself, right? I can't do that and have a balanced picture of what the world is like. So when I start writing, I'm going to end up writing this incredibly narrow, it's going to come to this laser point that doesn't embrace people as individuals. I'm going to start writing tripe.
Right.
So the next big question is, how do you do that?
Okay, for me, April's party, for example, she's standing there. I go find her.
Nice.
And it's hard for me. I am naturally shy. I'm a talkative, shy person, which is kind of unusual, but we blame it on the doctor who told my parents to make me talk a lot. But I go find her. I look for the most miserable person in the room.
Which
I look for
apparently
someone.
is me, by the way.
don't take it
Hey,
hard.
you did it. But if I try to find someone who actually looks more miserable than I feel, and I go talk to them, and usually they push back. They don't really want anyone talking to because they're uncomfortable. And I keep talking. And obviously you have to watch body language. If you keep talking and they're still moving far away, it's not going to work. But
If they start running, just let them go.
Yeah, just
You
let
got
'em
to
go.
respect their
Let 'em-
comfort
right.
level.
Right, but usually if you keep talking, and by talking I mean engaging, which means usually ask them questions. Just a hint, he who asks the questions controls the conversation. Usually they open up slowly but surely, or they make it obvious by body language that, hey, I want to hear you, keep talking to me, but I'm not going to engage much, but keep talking. You can see it.
Right. I'd also like to point out that we've been talking about writing books and getting out there so you understand the different types of people and situations that are in the world. But you should also realize that once your book's written, you got to interact with your readers.
What?
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
What? What's that all about? So my suggestion as an introvert would be control how you do that. If you are horrible at in-person book signings, use Facebook
Yep.
as a way to launch your book.
Yep.
I mean, there are alternatives. It gets you comfortable with the people who are reading your books, and eventually you can find a few that you'll be friendly enough, that you're comfortable enough that you will be able to potentially either meet them in person or get the nerve up to go to a bookstore and do a signing and
Because
find
they'll
out.
be there.
Yeah, because they'll be there.
Hey, I've done that. I've actually met with readers that I've never talked to. I've met with readers I've hardly even emailed with. I'm traveling, I'm going to this retreat, I stop in this town, we have, yogurt together, and guess what? They're my friends now. But that was really hard for me to say, yeah, I'll meet you for lunch. I hope I don't hate you. And oh yeah, I quoted someone exactly and used a word I don't usually use because I was so nervous talking to this person. This poor woman probably thinks I have a foul mouth. But
Oh my.
sorry, lady. And it was a very mild word, but for me, it was like, yeah, I might as well have said the worst you could say because I don't use those. And so this poor woman looked at me like, what? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just quoting. And yeah, hi, how you doing?
So-
you know what? I had a blast.
Here's another thing is we've talked about engaging with the readers and stuff like that, but we're always talking about the fact that you're not alone,
Right.
and you need cheerleaders, you need support.
Right.
You have to go out and find those people.
Yes.
And so for me, when I am going to do that, I have to plan it out. If I'm going to be doing it more than once, I have to really plan it out. And sometimes it's easy. So when I went on the Writing Excuses cruise, I knew I was going to be meeting people. But I had set a goal that I was going to have at least one conversation with each of the main hosts from the podcasts. And I
That's
prepped
smart.
myself for that. It was hard, but I did it. And I also knew that I was going to have a chance to talk to a whole bunch of other people. And I had to push myself through that, but planning it out made it so much easier for me to make it happen.
That's really a great way to do it.
And we've been talking a lot about introversion, but for the extroverts out there, my suggestion is just listen.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
you like going out, that's great, but I know it's going to be hard. Okay, maybe not for you guys, but for my husband, got to keep your mouth shut and open those ears and listen to the people talking to you, the conversations that are happening. Be watchful and then take time and download that and figure out how that information you just found in the world can be applied to your writing.
Take time to think about it. Yeah.
Exactly. And we are just out of time. So if you're an introvert, go respond to an existing comment on Amazon. Go find your favorite book.
Or preferably on this podcast.
Ooh, that would be even better.
On our podcast would be great too. Write a comment. Okay, get yourself out there. If you're an extrovert, we want you to comment, but then we want you to think about it.
Go in your corner and behave yourself and think about what you just read.
Did?
Huh?
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
That.
So this has been Alive and Writing, because sometimes that's all you have, but it's all you really need. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.